This is Leadership in Action, and I'm Mark Stiles, your host. Join me as we delve deep into the passions, expertise, and experiences of Boston area innovators. Sponsored by the Boston chapter of Entrepreneurs Organization, this is Leadership in Action. Hey, folks, welcome to another episode of Leadership in Action, the EO Boston chapter podcast. Today's guest is an entrepreneur, a change agent. He has co-founded and founded several startups in media, e-commerce, and telecommunications in multiple countries, resulting in three successful exits. He currently finds himself as a mentor to startups, an entrepreneur, and an angel investor, managing partner and co-founder of Venture Lane Studio, and a member of EO Boston since 2016. May I introduce Christian Magel. How are you, Christian?
Good, thank you. Thanks for having me on your podcast, Mark. Very looking forward to it.
Super honored to have you. Ready for question number one?
Absolutely.
Let's do this.
Shooting.
Let's do it. What is a common misconception about leadership, running a business, and being an entrepreneur?
So that made me think quite a bit about it because, what is a misconception? And the one thing that really popped in my head is actually that something that I learned a lot about it being an EO member, and that is it's not necessarily all about yourself, and that vulnerability actually opens so many gates to great leadership that you would not understand if you're still standing in front of the door with that kind of perception. So over time, I understood that being vulnerable and being, not being the perfect and not being always the front man and not always, trying to be the forceful leader, but being vulnerable, passing it on to the team, hearing them out, if you getting the feedback actually makes you a much better leader, but more importantly, makes the company and what you're building there, the organization, a much better organization. But it seems counterintuitive because everybody around you tells you need to be forceful, strong, energetic. And the contrary is the case. In my experience, the more vulnerable you get and the more open you get also with the stuff that you're not okay with, the better your company gets because it allows everybody to play the best role and not just one person taking all the roles.
But who's telling you that you need to be out there energetic and not vulnerable and the face and the pushing forward and do it all person?
But here's the thing. Most likely you're going to tell yourself, right? It's the limiting belief of you gotta pull the carriage. It's on your shoulders. Like if you don't do it, nobody else will do it. Nobody will do it as good as you do it. Nobody knows this better than you. And I have not seen a single situation where somebody else couldn't add on at least a couple percentage of a better outcome when you do this as a team and in a group play.
So help me understand that. So adding somebody in, right? So we're hearing delegation, right? So we have the entrepreneur who I'll just do it myself. I'll do it. I'll get it done. It'll be faster than explaining how to do it. But to help us explain that when you add somebody on and take something away, like where is the metrics on that?
So first of all, I think everybody, if you believe that everybody needs to play to their strength, there's 100% certainty that you not only have strength, but there's better sides and weaker sides that you have. If you play to your strength, there's weaker sides. If other people have their strength in that weaker side, all together as a team, you will do better. And frankly, by the way, who could be these people? I've seen it play out from an intern that says, "Hey, I have a great idea here. Why don't we do it this way?" To your co-founder, right? And over time, you find your balance and you're open to this. But I found being vulnerable and being even open with the team of like, listen, I feel uncomfortable here, or this is not for me, or I hate to do this, but I'm doing it, opened up the door to so many conversations around, well, why didn't you say something? Like, I could do this. I've done this before, or I know this is my strength. I'm a very structured person, for example. And that made the whole thing better. That person feels better about themselves because they can take on a task that before they were not entrusted with. Makes me feel better because I don't need to suck at something where I think I need to be really great at, and maybe I'm not. So it's, to your point, I think it's many times a self telling us we need to do this, and it's a limiting belief.
So that's really interesting. And one of the things I thought of while you were saying that is the hesitation that I've had in the past, right? I hate doing this. Well, why do I hate doing it? But if I hate doing it, how could I dump that on somebody else, right? But maybe it fits them better.
So here's the thing: we did a great exercise. One, we did, like, the whole team did, like, what am I doing right now with my week? So what are the chunks that I'm doing, what I'm responsible for? And then what do I like doing more of, and what do I like to do less of? And everybody in the team did this prep and came back in the session, and we went person by person, we went through this exercise. And while we had this communication, and everybody was very open and also vulnerable, but like, I don't want to do, I want to do less of. I know that's my job, but I want to do less of. People chimed in, well, hey, I can help you there, or I would like to do this, or I found a way to do this very efficiently. And even in the session, just speaking it out, like, there were already swapping of roles and responsibilities going on. And that I find like a really awesome environment, because that also means your team has your back, but also people see the chance that they can climb up the ladder and grow into something that they haven't done yet. So I think this is a terribly liberating exercise.
So lead by example, right? So leader is vulnerable. Let's get in a circle and be vulnerable, because I know there's a lot of folks who go to work and protect what they're doing, right? They want to protect their work products, but even if they don't like it, even if it's square peg, round hole, it's theirs and they own it. You're asking them to trust, right? To trust that we like you, you're going to stay, but we'd rather you do something that you enjoy doing because you'll do better for it.
No, absolutely. And, we talk about it a bit later, but like, we're working a lot with entrepreneurs and startup entrepreneurs, like dozens and hundreds of them. And, you're the leader, you're the head of the organization. People will mimic your behavior. And if you're closing up and if you're not vulnerable, your team most likely will have a challenge being vulnerable because they feel it's not accepted. But it's think of vulnerability as a part of a language and part of a communication. You can openly talk about the good and the bad stuff. If you only talk about the good stuff, the bad stuff is not taken care of. On the other hand, if you only talk about the bad stuff, it's probably also not a healthy environment. But if everybody can trust each other and be totally open with, I don't like that, or I'm not good at this, anybody else here? I think that's a great value to the team, and where you need to be as an entrepreneur and have a support system as an entrepreneur.
But at that point, if you're offloading something, you have to onload something in exchange, right? As a team, or no?
I do not. I follow the philosophy. I need to fire myself. My job is to start things as an entrepreneur, but that's just personally my opinion. I'm starting the things, I'm getting them on track, and then I'm firing myself from that job. That doesn't necessarily mean that I need to take something else on. If I still want to grow, maybe I do that. But sometimes it's also, maybe that opens up half a day a week where I can take care of completely different stuff or something that interests me. So to your point, Mark, absolutely right. I thought is, well, if I'm getting rid of something, then I need to prove everybody that I take on something else. But that's not smart and that's not clever. because in the end, it's about what kind of impact and result are you getting, and not whether you keep yourself busy and show everybody that you're keeping yourself busy. Busy for the sake of busy is for me is not a result, or something that you want to strive for.
I love that. And thank you for bringing such clarity to that. We all evolve as business owners and entrepreneurs and leaders, right? So you had three separate events that we could dig into it as much as you want, each one of those events. We could do an executive summary, but I'm curious where you started to learn these things through your evolution as an entrepreneur.
Oh, frankly, so my story was like I always wanted to. I loved fast-paced environments, and I loved like I was more like a operations guy. Um, and my I didn't grow up in like a super entrepreneurial environment, so I always wanted to understand all the building blocks for building a company. And started off after school, as a junior product manager in a media company, but that was already in a newly started venture like at the time. And 27 years later, I realized like I literally worked throughout my life in startup environments, so I learned that trait of getting responsibility early on, and living with risky environments and quick changes and pivots and stuff like that. It always energized me, and I always loved it. Um, I had a couple of, and then I was an employee, then I became an executive, and then over time I became a co-founder, and then I became a founder. And every time I kind of learned a little bit of like what to do. When you're an executive, I think you learn how to manage people, and learn how to deal with teams. I think that's where I learned how to lead, and how to get that right. As a co-founder, you're seeing more dimensions. Like as a VP, for example, you would probably look at your little department. As a co-founder, all of a sudden you look at the whole thing. As if you're the founder, then all of a sudden you're becoming the CEO, and this is not just being responsible for the whole thing, but you're leading the whole thing. So all of this was a great journey from working in the business to working on the business. And that was probably one of my hardest learning that I learned in the last company that we did an IPO. Was a telecommunication company that we IPO'd in Sydney, Australia. And I realized at some point that I can come back and start in the working in the nitty gritty again with everybody, or I can learn to be remote or take a step back and work on the business, meaning setting KPIs, setting goals, setting metrics, and manage those metrics like a shareholder more so than a boss, or like an operational boss. And that was the hardest thing, because I needed to accept that other people have different ideas on, for example, executing campaigns and operational things. And the easy way that I said, like, okay, if that bears the results that we said we want to achieve, then that's okay. And if not, then we need to have a conversation about the how. But I'm not getting involved in the how. We're talking about the what and the achievement of the what. And that was, for me, that was a big step, understanding what's in the business versus on the business.
So tell us about what you're doing now with the young entrepreneurs and your mentoring.
So my background is, as you said, like I've been a multi-time founder in the tech space, and I really enjoyed that experience. So the last two companies, we got to about $300 million in sales, each of them, and had a good exit. And I worked with like very talented and great and smart co-founders alongside. And I had one big goal, and that was one of my big goals was financial freedom, and the last exit kind of really provided me with that. And I'm married to a Boston girl. We were in Sydney, and we have three kids. So it was all of a sudden I was in a situation where, for the first time, I could completely choose everything that I wanted, like where to live, what to do, which by the way is a really tough choice to make, because before you always like, oh well, you should do this or you're good at that, and there's some rail or guardrails here, and this one it was a little bit difficult. So we decided as a family that we wanted to move from Sydney to Boston, where my wife grew up, and we had family. But I had no connection here to the business world. I knew that Boston would be a great startup hub. It's a great town. I've been here many times. Feel also at home, so I knew that, but I had no business connections or network here. And I decided I wanted to give back, support, be a change agent, as you said at the very beginning. For I found out I'm really good at change and managing change and putting structures in place and being an entrepreneur and at that early stage. And coming here to Boston, I decided like I wanted to build a platform and like a physical place where founders would come together and we give them a support system. So we started Venture Lane as a startup hub for early stage B2B software companies here in Boston. And Boston is a phenomenal ecosystem for tech companies. I don't know if you all know this, is like the fourth largest in the world. We're about 4,000 to 6,000 startups here, some in life sciences, some in tech. And we focused on that part. And we opened up a 10,000 square foot space down here in downtown Crossing, and we invited the right companies in here. So it was a curated space, and we wanted to make an impact on those companies with support, peer-to-peer support, mentorship, programs, and all of that stuff. And that gave, well, first of all, that was very satisfying in two respects of meeting the ecosystem here and get to learn what everybody's doing here. But on the other hand, really, we saw that we could really make a difference for those companies.
So how did these companies find you? How did you find them? How does that work?
Oh, different. Like some we would do cold outreach, some would be inbound, some would be referrals. Frankly, it was all usually there would always be some touch of somebody knowing us or we knew them. We do a lot of events. We have a webinar series. We have workshops that we put out there. We did by now probably about 500 workshops that we partially did for the public. During Corona, it took us 2 days after the lockdown. We put out a whole new program that was all remote. So, we built our database from zero to 15,000 individuals and probably around 2,000-3,000 organizations. So I'm a marketer, so that I learned that, and we built this step by step. By now, we have 50 plus companies here at Venture Lane being members, and then at the beginning of this year, we started Venture Lane Studio, which is an accelerator program, a traction accelerator for B2B software companies, where we help these companies with mostly traction, go-to-market, revenue, sales, marketing, help them also along with their operating system. In short, putting the building blocks together that you need to be a scalable company, first a repeatable, and then a scalable, and then an investable company. And we invest our time and invest $100,000 check into those companies. So we do that now twice a year, and we have about 10 companies a year that we do this with, which is incredibly satisfying because I can be an operator again. We can be a support system for those founders, and we can let them figure out the number one key success factor for an early stage startup that is getting traction and getting the feedback from the market on your product, on your organization, on your setup, on your strategy. And it's been a wonderful ride, and we just finished the application for our second cohort, so that is filled, and the next one will come out in March 2023.
What do you mean by second cohort? Is that a second location?
So no, a second cohort. So we do 2 cohorts a year, each 4 to 6 companies. So we submitted the next 4 companies for this cohort, and then we start preparing for the next cohort group of companies that we would admit into the program.
Got it. How many years would you have saved if you had jumped in there in the beginning? as a member of something, an incubator type like this?
You mean how many years I would say for myself?
Yeah. If you were starting out as a founder and found yourself with you as a mentor, right? Somebody like you
Oh,
willing to do this, like what
oh,
would,
I literally think so. There's two bits. There's a time frame.
yeah.
I think we probably save, depending on business type and founder, somewhere between 6 months and 2 years. Um, I would say, and that's one bit. And the other one is, I think, we increase your chance of success and to survive in general. So the one is time saving, that always assumes that you're still going to be successful just with a time lag. I think we're in early stage. You're doing that, but the more crucial one is obviously, you know, will you survive this, and how well will you survive? And do you get the right resources, be it the right team, be it the right support, be it funding, to do your next step? And can you outpace your competitors? And I think it's hard to put a number at it, but I would say we significantly increase your chance to survive by having the building blocks in place that you need as a company later on anyway, and to do this early on. You got to be very metric driven. You're going to be very focus driven. Many of the Boston EOS members might know Traction, which is one operating system. We do OKRs and a bit of a different version that's better for tech startups that need to be very nimble and need to pivot quite easily. But yeah, those two things: we save you time, we make your success rate for survival much higher, and all the things that are needed to actually prove this and make it successful. Fundraising, certain milestones and so on.
So you obviously make the introductions or to investors or venture or what have you when there's the next event. When do you realize this isn't working?
So this is an interesting thing. Um, it is part of the journey, and built in, it will not work.
Right.
I have not seen a single startup where everything worked. And here's the thing: it's not a matter of it working or not working. Actually, you want it to not work, but it needs to come quick. It is, can you measure, so how quick do you get to the realization it's not working?
Right.
And if it's not working, you actually tried something new. If everything is working, most likely you've never tried something truly new and that you're uncomfortable with, and took the risk. So most likely you will fail at subsets of what you assume is right. But here's the magic: is not to not fail. The magic is to realize really quickly that it's failing. And the way, and you asked, how do we figure that out? We put a tight number of KPIs and metrics around what we're aiming for. And let's say, we want to get 10 customers by that point of time. And that means we need to talk to 100 customers here to get to the 10 customers there. And we never get to the 100. We're always getting stuck at 20 or 30 because they're not advancing, and we have the right process in place. We see this approach is not working. And for example, we need to change the product from this to that. And then let's try again, and let's get those 100 in to then get to the 10, for example. It's that. People run out of money because they're doing the wrong thing for too long of time. People do not fail by making mistakes.
That is profound. They don't fail because they're making mistakes. They're doing something wrong for too long. And how many of us have done that? I mean, we could talk about employees, keeping an employee for too long. How much does it cost you for not ripping that Band-Aid off faster? Right.
Yeah.
So let's talk about
it's the measuring part, and it's the realization. Then the doing it and the pivoting is a whole different thing. It is the set up the metrics that actually show you something is not going right.
and you need a change agent, a change director to help you see that and say, no, not a big deal. We're going this way now.
Exactly.
And that's you.
Sometimes, yeah. And
right.
we play that role, but we're a medium, right? So it's not our opinion here. Is like we're giving you feedback, and sometimes that, you've seen that as an entrepreneur, you need to have a character trait that is call it positivity, positive thinking, naivete to a point. And if you're not, and if you're looking in hindsight, would you have done this if you had known how hard it is? I would say in a lot of times you wouldn't even start it if you knew that it's hard. But your optimism keeps you doing stuff. But optimism, believing, or in other terms, believing your own bullshit, can work in your favor, but it also can work against you. And if you believe your own bullshit for too long of a time, it doesn't work in your favor because you have scarce resources, and those resources get less and less and less, money, time, whatever it is. And then you're hit a wall because there's nothing left. So it's that fine balance between those two.
So you mentioned an intern. Sometimes the intern raises their hand and changes the trajectory of the company. I assume a lot of the members of your incubator venture are younger folks. Help me understand the mind of that younger generation when it comes to change and flushing a bad idea and moving on.
That's the funny thing. So we have a good mix between serial entrepreneurs, sometimes folks that are a little like, maybe in their 40s even. They maybe have a technical background and not a sales background, and therefore they're reaching out to us. And they're kind of juniors in that area, but they're a little bit more set in their ways of what to do. I I have to say I'm in awe of a generation that a 25-year-old would say, I'm going to build a company. I'm going to raise millions of dollars. And I'm 25 years old. And I probably would have not, I could have not done it back at the time. Back at the time was still, well, you need to earn your merits and you need to get a little bit of experience and all of that. And maybe an investor would have not given you the money back at the time. So I think that the younger generation, so think of everybody between 20 and 35, these days has a built-in, not everybody, the people that want to be entrepreneurs, they bring with them a really great uh, attitude of taking risk, because they've seen it so many times with other playing out. Even when you have a role model, you're what was maybe back at the time a perceived risk today becomes like, well, you failed, that's okay. Or you're taking that risk, that's okay. Maybe you do it until you're 25 and then you decide. So that's awesome. The times have never been better of having a mentor, having a coach. I mean, here coming to Boston, that opened my eyes of the support system that is out there these days is amazing. For every founder, there's probably 5 people that would like to support you in your journey for nothing many times, or being just a coach or being an investor maybe. So there's a great opportunity these days. And the other thing is, when I started as an entrepreneur, you needed to build your product from scratch. Today, you can build this product in a month or two by just putting together a patchwork and building blocks of tech, and you can have a functioning website. So, but this generation has a good knack of trying things out, failing, repeating, pivoting, and resilience. I'm in awe on like how resilient some of these guys are, that going through a second or third pivot and still believe what they're doing and still finding their way and building great companies. So I have to say, like, that is probably the best entrepreneurial generation that we had so far.
I love it. I love what I'm seeing with these bright, fresh minds. And I love how some of these seasoned companies are really engaging with the bright young minds and saying, no, come here, let's go. Get in the boardroom here. Let's whiteboard this thing. Let's workshop this. Your idea hasn't been stifled yet. You haven't experienced imposter syndrome. You haven't experienced someone saying you can't do this yet. So open up your mind and let's hear some of the stuff that comes out of your mouth. And
And
let's
you've seen this, right, Mark? So you probably had this experience of like, if you let them and they come in with obviously the right bones, it's amazing what they can do. And just because it's your own story that you didn't do it at 25, that doesn't mean that somebody else can't do it.
that's exactly what I'm talking about. And when we were 25, it wasn't that long ago. For those watching on YouTube, maybe you'll agree it has been a long time. But those who are listening, most of you are listening, you don't know. But back at 25, was that available? Was there a Christian Magel out there saying, come, 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 the water's warm? We were digging in and trying to figure it out and reading books and patching it together. Was that environment there? And if it was, I missed it. But for now, like, how do we let these young minds, these courageous founders, find folks like you?
I mean, there are a lot of programs out there. I think the universities do a much better job these days. Boston has a a specific history of letting some of the biggest fishes off the hook. Think of Bill Gates and Facebook and a bunch of others that were great founders, and they've been in the great Boston universities here, and they still went to the Valley. I think that kind of changes a little bit these days after Corona or after COVID anyway. How do you find people? I think there's a lot of nurturing. So people go through phases here. They might start with an idea, and then maybe it might be a bad idea, and then it becomes a better idea, and then it becomes a good idea. Maybe at some point it gets a great idea, and sometimes it takes some time. It's ecosystem players like Venture Lane, the space that we do here. It's like our accelerator. There's a bunch of great accelerators here in Boston, but also in the US. There's university systems that do, and a bunch of really great players that really fertilize that ground and really put the seeds in. And it's also a numbers game. I'm mentoring at Harvard iLabs. The last class is 600 people.
Wow.
Like 600, and I think it's out of those 600, I think it's close to 400 or 500 different companies. So, and some are super early stage, like they just had an idea and wanna put this out there. But it needs that. But that out of those 600, there's maybe 50 get funding and maybe 10 make it big every year. But that's fine. For everyone that makes it, or for everyone that doesn't make it, that founder has probably a great experience, and that great experience is maybe well suited to be a number 2 or number 3 in one of those startups, or maybe a VP or something at a later stage. So that is not lost at all. So how do we find this? I think there's a lot of offers out there, and I only encourage, by the way, not only for being paid or giving somebody equity. There's a lot of pro bono support out there, and look at your environment, your alumni, your school. There's if you're a mentor, reach out to those. If you're a coach, by the way, if you feel like you want to support any of this, reach out to me. Happy to find a good match. So there's plenty of opportunity to make the matchmaking for the mentors and the mentees.
I love it. Okay, so we're learning from you. We want to learn who Christian is, right? So you said your wife is from the Boston area. Your accent, for those listening, is not a Boston accent. Help me understand. Help me understand your background and how you found your way.
So I'm originally from Munich, where I lived my first close to 20 years. My mom and my family is still there. And if you ask me who I am, I would probably say, like, deep in my heart, I'm a Bavarian. So that's the region, and that comes with, wearing lederhosen and going to Oktoberfest and stuff like that. So this is where I grew up. Went partially to university, but then, kind of embarked on the great journey of life. Studied in nearby Frankfurt, and then, did a semester in the US, did a semester in France, and then went really to work for startups, and then for that went to we worked in Cologne, worked in Düsseldorf. We moved as a family to Sydney, where we stayed for 7 years, and then 5 years ago we actually ended up coming here to Boston.
When you were growing up as a Bavarian boy, when did you realize something was different? You were an entrepreneur. You weren't an employee. There's something more to you.
So there's a funny thing. Well, first of all, my calendar as a kid, every single day was filled with outside school activity. So I was a Boy Scout. I played soccer. I was a referee. I was a coach. I did I did jobs. Like I had every day, to the dismay of my parents and to the dismay of my teachers, because my grades weren't really great. But by now, I probably had 50 jobs, and I loved it. I loved the doing and the operational bit. I think that was maybe a first sign that I I was probably more like the street smart guy and the operational guy than the academics guy. Um, the other thing is I always loved the adventure. So, uh, big languages, there be different cultures, and that probably was a hint that I love fast changing environments that have enough newness and that kind of, quench the thirst for curiosity, adventure, and growing. I always had this growth mindset of I want to grow. And the worst times in my life was when I hit this glass ceiling and I had the feeling that I could not grow. So, and believe it or not, like I always believed I would somehow end up in the United States. For some reason, I don't know. There's so many great things here in the US, and tech startups is only one. I worked in media before too, so probably I would have maybe ended up in a film studio or something like that. But there were many great things here in the US that I thought, the Europe would not have. And I don't know, for some reason I was destined to at some point live here and work here.
I
Uh,
love that act of visualization, right? You see it and it happens. But I'm certainly not going to let you go past that glass ceiling. I know our listeners are as curious as I am. You hit that glass ceiling. Where were you? What was the circumstances around that? And how did you break through?
so I'll give you a couple of examples. Like being in Munich is a beautiful city. Love it. I know many of my friends, you don't have to move. There's plenty of opportunity there. Great environment, good quality of living. At some point, it just felt I need to get out of here. I need to spread my wings. And I did so. That was a glass ceiling, and it opened up a whole new range of opportunities. Took risks. And frankly, it was probably also hard sometimes on my family because, we moved, like if I'm just looking at the number of houses that we lived in, or number of places that we lived in, is probably 15 or so. Like my oldest is 21. Uh, been in, 7 different schools, kindergartens, all of that stuff. So they're probably a little harder on them, but like they also got exposed to a lot of different dimension and perspectives and cultures, which I'm really glad about. But it was not always easy. Sometimes I would be in a professional situation where I hit a glass ceiling of, I my craft is I'm the marketing guy, but I always wanted to understand the whole picture. So at some point, my founder group, we were 4 or 5 co-founders all together, and I felt that I need to make that leap, maybe to become a CEO at some point, or prove myself, being that person that actually started something from scratch on my own, and I coming here to the US that kind of helped me to do that. And frankly, it allowed me to get a perspective of, oh, there's many good things to this. I'm glad I did it. There's many bad things with this too, as everybody here can imagine. Of you figure out like, oh, it's sometimes good to have a co-founder team that worked together for over a decade, and things are worked out. But again, like to early on, like sometimes you need to take risk, and sometimes you need to be open to make mistakes, and to figure that out and quench your thirst for newness and curiosity. And I did that, and I think being an entrepreneur allowed me to do that. But yeah, I had my share of uh, like glass ceilings, and I had to break through this. And by now, I'm actually good enough to realize that I need to change something. My demeanor, you could probably read from my face if I'm not happy in a happy place. And then, yeah, my family helps me. My partners here help me to do this. My team here helps me to do this, which is really awesome. I have a fantastic team at Venturelane, and a fantastic partner in Venturelane Studio, Brian Denmark, who's also an EO member. So these people help me kind of realize this and kind of move on. Go around the glass ceiling or go through the glass ceiling.
I love it. Go around it or through it. I love that. So what are you doing in your personal life? You mentioned you have a daughter who's 21. You've got your venture studio going where you Venture Lane studio going where you are helping and doing a wonderful, wonderful thing for many, many folks. But what are you doing when you're spending your private time, your personal time?
So we're in an interesting phase, like many others. Like we have three kids. Two are now kind of out of the door in college, and one is still at home. So we just came back from parents weekend, which was great fun, and we love hanging out with our kids. But yeah, listen, like I love skiing. I like sailing. I like being on the water. I love nature, and nothing makes me more happy than being on a top of a mountain, or being out in nature. Yesterday we did a little drive up to New Hampshire, looking at the foliage, which was beautiful. That kind of really gets me, really is really joyful. And this summer, actually, I discovered a whole new passion, which is we've been down in Duxbury here, South Shore. The Boston folks would know it, and they're known to have like a really nice area where you can uh, go clamming and pick oysters. And so I got really big into oysters, reading everything up there, and I got these Zen moments. Being out there, low tide, you stand out there in the mud, you're picking your jumbo oysters or your smaller oysters up and put it in your bucket. The tide comes in, it's, the clouds are out there, the sun is shining, the smell of the salty air is out there, and then you get out and you open that oyster, and nothing is more fresh than fresh sucked oysters right from the ocean. So I got all entrenched into the idea of oysters, learning everything about oysters, the ecosystem where they thrive, and what to do and what to pick. So that was the latest. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. So, Christian, if someone were to want to get a hold of you, and I know you've put yourself out there as someone who is willing to help folks, what is the best way for them to reach out to you?
Well, obviously, all kind of channels, LinkedIn, Twitter. You'll find me under Christian Magel, Magel, or you can directly write me an email under christian.magel at theventurelane.com. So it's first name dot last name at theventurelane.com. And if you're in the EO network, reach out to me through the EO Slack or any other thing. So I'm usually pretty good in responding. I might not have the time to go through all in depth, but I usually pretty good in following up with everybody and help out. And by the way, that's always if it's for yourself or anybody that that is in that tech space and just needs a little advice or a little hint here and there. I always try to set aside a little bit of time in the week where I'm helping out just anybody who reaches out and who needs a little support and a little help.
Wow. And folks, fear not. In your show notes, Casey and his team at Ringmaster We'll have in the show notes those links. So you can link right through to Christian. Christian, thank you, my friend. This has been really, really amazing. I learned a lot. I'm looking forward to sharing this with a lot of people because you're a special guy. I really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you, Mark. And let me tell you, it's really special. I've been on the EO journey for quite a while, and I'm still getting to know the Boston chapter, and I think it's such a fantastic environment that heightens your self-awareness. So what you're doing, such a great job bringing everybody on the journey, on everybody else's journey. There's nothing else, and we all know this, than sharing your experience, and people take away from it whatever they want to do. So thank you for providing that platform to share my experience.
And folks, if you see Christian, go up and say hi now. Thank you all.
Give me a hug.
Yeah, big hug, big hug. But I want to thank everyone for listening. It's been great. Thank you, everyone. If you learned something today or you laughed, tell someone about this podcast. Share it with them. Thank you, my friend. Christian, I appreciate you very much.
Thank you, Mark.
This has been another exciting episode of Leadership in Action. We will see you next time. Leadership in Action is sponsored by the Boston chapter of the Entrepreneurs Organization. As the world's only peer-to-peer network exclusively for entrepreneurs, EO helps transform the lives of those who transform the world.